The thematic choices we make in board games is fascinating. Like, we're at the point now where we're running a meat packing plant for funsies. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm covering Union Stockyards, a game about running one of the big five meat packing plants in Chicago in the 1940s or so. As across 6 rounds of play, you try to become the most efficient, gather the most wealth, the endgame wealth, which is basically points, in-game money, add it all up at the end, and see who won. This is a worker placement game, and before we go further, we should note, this is a prototype. Everything you see here, rules, components, all that stuff, subject to change. This is a game currently on Kickstarter. I'll have a link in the description down below. But this is a game across 6 rounds in which you'll be placing your workers out every single round in order to take a variety of actions and ultimately become as efficient as possible. The ways and hows are where, of course, the intricacies of the game lie. You'll take your workers, which will vary based on the player count. Currently, I'm set up for a 3-player game. Depending on the player count, you'll have different options as far as where you place the variety of houses over here, the initial meat packing plants, and from there, it's just about taking a variety of actions around the board in order to try to get better at the game, in order to build buildings, in order to place your branch houses, in order to slaughter your livestock as efficiently as possible, all these different things, gathering specialists, a whole bunch of stuff. Let's go through the various zones, let's go through the sequence. Let's go through the sequence of play, the various zones, all the worker placement actions. The basic idea is you're going to follow the player aid. Every player is going to have their own little player aid here, exact same thing, in which you're going to go through phase 1, start of the year, where livestock will arrive. In the yards over here, you're going to add livestock to the board based on the price point of that livestock. All livestock over here has 2 price points. The price that livestock is worth, the more expensive it is, the more people are trying to supply to the yards, and then you have your own individual price point, which is how efficient you are, who you're selling to, what your network looks like, so that ideally, when the price is over at 24, you're actually still able to sell it for 28, because if your selling point is 20 and you have to buy it for 24, that would be a very inefficient action that you should not pursue. So you're always trying to manage the general board price is always in play. You're trying to manage your personal price as far as how you're going to manipulate and be able to sell efficiently. So you have over here, livestock will arrive depending on the price. You're going to go ahead and flip the year card, taking the action on the year, the bottom of which will show you what the possible Union spirit over here, which can result in strikes and workers being off-duty on the picket line. You're going to flip it over, adjusting this downwards by -1. In this case, that has no impact because, it actually starts at 1. We're going to go down to 0. And then from there, you're going to potentially have a little bit of a text, flavor text and all that stuff, an event that happened, and then every card is going to be different. This one adds a worker placement spot that'll be available for this round only. From there, you're going to go ahead and if there's a strike, every player is going to go ahead and gain one of these. These are going to be worth negative points the more you have at the end of the game. Let's put those over there. And then you're going to go ahead and lose 1 to the picket line. If there were a strike, each player will place 1 down there. That's only if there were a strike. From there, you go to the worker phase where you're going to take your workers, place them out on the board in a variety of spots. And this is where we'll try to cover most things. I may miss 1 or 2. Let's start with the yards over here. You can take your worker, place them on the yards in order to slaughter that type of animal. When you do so, you're going to go ahead and look at the difference in price and get that much money. You do not have to lay out cash. Thematically speaking, this is equivalent to owing your suppliers as you pay on net 30-day terms or whatever it is. So you don't have to lay out the cash. You simply sell it for the difference in your sell point versus the buy point. You get that much money, which is why specializing can be helpful. The downside is you can only go to each spot once per round. You cannot take 2 slaughtering hogs action. You can only do once per round, so specializing does have a point where it caps out in its efficiencies. From there, you're going to go ahead and let's just take a variety of actions here. You're going to have buying land over here. Buying land is where you're going to spend money, and you're going to take one of your land ownership cards, placing it down on the board, which will make it cheaper for when you build buildings, also making it so that your opponents have to pay you if they build over that spot. They can still build over that spot, but they'll have to pay you $1 per space, so getting in early on the land game will be much cheaper than trying to build along here if you don't own the land. Speaking of which, from here, we're going to go over here. We're going to go through the build sequence. It's all covered on your player aid. Basic idea, though, is you're going to pick one of the buildings up here. You're going to look for buildings that match that shape. So let's say I build this ice house over here. I'm going to go ahead and grab the ice house. I'm going to try putting it on the board, being mindful of the fact that I'll have to pay the bank or others for any spots I don't own. You know this 6 spot of land that cost me $2? Well, if instead I just place it down on the board, it's going to cost me $1 per space, making it much more expensive. Then again, that worker that you used to buy the land, that worker could alternatively go making you more money. So for instance, if you have a very efficient, cattle, if your cattle price is at 19, that single worker might be worth 5 money to you anyway. So even though the land's cheaper, not always worth it. You have to be mindful of that as you play. From there, you're going to go ahead and modify this. You can go ahead and move your cattle price up one, for example. You'll move yourself up on the reputation track over there. You'll take those effects at the beginning of the game as you buy the card. And this effect is basically 4 points at the end of the game. The game refers to it as wealth, but it's basically 4 points. There's in-game money, which is the currency you can spend, and then there's your savings or your points, which you'll get at the end of the game. This symbol just here means end of the game, and that symbol means +4 health. You buy a building, you take it, put it off to the side, and then you're able to start putting these buildings out on the board. As your buildings slowly connect to the edge over here, you're going to start, let's say you eventually move one over there, you're going to take these and put them on their specific areas, which are going to be very helpful, because that will make these houses over here, that'll make these branch houses worth points at the end of the game. In general, the branch houses, you're going to be taking actions to place branch houses in play. You're going to be able to do that with over here with the established branch house action, where you're going to pay money, put a branch house out, and when you do so, you're going to get the immediate effect of the branch house, which often involves raising prices, getting endgame points, things like that. And at the end of the game, each branch house in a location from your little branch houses over here is worth points, 2 points per token there. Each spot has 1 potential token, and then there are 2 wilds, which means you could have up to 4 points per branch house once you start connecting all of those. The campaign spot over here will allow you to take 2 points. Additionally, you'll get the first player marker, and you get to choose which one of these spots you want it to be. There's going to be 2 different options for that worker placement spot for the next round. Then over here, we have national advertising and Chicago advertising. Chicago advertising is cheaper, but less effective. National advertising will cost you $2, but more effective, where you'll move yourself up on this track, and as you cross various lines, you'll be modifying your price, and additionally, there are end game points to be had on the reputation track as you go over there. Building viaducts is an action where you can put one of these in play. They're valid for adjacency bonuses, as well as sometimes trying to get that last spot to move them out. They're not necessarily as obviously used, but sometimes there are. Wage increase will allow you to pay $2 to lose one of these tokens, which again is negative points if you have too many of them, as well as lowering the strike track, the Union Spirit track, so that hopefully there's not a strike in play. Although remember, strikes affect everyone equally, so often it's more about managing your tokens while having a general net positive effect on the game. Contract work allows you to get extra dollars, and then as we said already, there's the just general placement of putting your people down on those spots to slaughter as many animals as possible. Well, 1 per type per player, and that's basically the worker placement actions you're playing over here. So all the things intertwine in the sense that many of the things you're doing are going to be raising your price points in a variety of ways, having an effect on what you're doing. One thing we didn't talk about is as you buy buildings, you'll have different symbols in the lower left sometimes, not always, and when you have the correct symbols matching the specialist, you'll take the specialist. Again, taking the immediate action over there, and then additionally the end game actions as well. So you're going to have specialists, which are basically almost like another building in play, but a perk for getting the right set of buildings for building them out. So you're trying to be mindful of all these things as you go through things. How do you want to be mindful of your price? Where are you being mindful of your buildings? Are you just trying to place down land tokens to get in the way of other players, knowing full well they'll have to pay you a premium? It could be a profitable little land game on its own. What about the branch houses? Trying to get a variety of branch houses out over here. If you combine that with getting the right branch houses, and each spot has a limited number of tokens over there, a limited number of spots for branch houses, all of these give you different intertwining, interweaving things in order to become as efficient as possible at the game as soon as the 6 rounds are up. From there, let's go to the end of round phase. And then the round phase, we're going to resolve the election, which is going to basically give the player the first player token. We're going to choose the party in office, which gives you 2 possible actions, either placing down multiple branch houses or a kind of more efficient wage increase thing where you're going to be able to go here, lowering the Union Spirit by 3 and losing a token without it even costing you the $2. Then we're going to retrieve all your workers and adjust livestock prices according to the inventory. Over here we have the year-end adjustment, in which we're going to look here. Whichever animal type or types have the fewest, we're going to raise that price, and whichever one has the most, we're going to lower that price. So you're trying to always be mindful of what your price point is of your inventory and which things you're going to most want to slaughter, and therefore which price points you want to ensure go down or up or all of that. And that's basically what's happening. Rinse and repeat across 6 rounds, place your workers, be mindful of strikes, try to be a drop more efficient than other players, and that is Union Stockyards. Let's talk about the game. Ease of play. Game's fairly easy to learn. There's a lot of things going on, but it all moves together. It all works together very smoothly. There's a few small little nitpicks of things that could be a drop more clear. I don't love the way points or money, you kind of have your savings, which is thematically appropriate, but also makes it a little confusing because you're getting money in the game, but you get savings, which is really just points. That has nothing to do with money. And then you have money, which is in-game. Small things like that. Nothing crazy, though. Overall, the game is fairly clear. It's a standard worker placement game. A standard worker placement game that has a bit of a market going on, has a bit of a land game, a little bit, not really a polyomino game. Technically polyomino, but doesn't really feel like a polyomino game. A lot of things that work together fairly well. Getting the end tracks over here, moving to the getting your branch houses in play and getting points and in-game bonuses. A game is fairly simple to play, fairly simple to understand if you've played a worker placement game before. As far as player count, this is a 2 to 5 player game. This particular prototype didn't have a 2-player board, so I didn't have a chance to play it at 2. I've only played this one at 3 players so far, so I can't comment on the 4 or 5 player game, and definitely can't comment on the 2-player game because that's not even available to play, at least with this. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. To begin with, the worker placement spots matter. One of my key things with worker placement games is the fact that I want to feel like I have 4 or 5 things I want to do, and I need to do some of them, but I know full well you're going to get in my way, and this game definitely has that. You want to do a little bit of everything. You want to slaughter the cattle, the animals in play, but you might get other players going there first, and if you get there first, I won't have that chance. Buying land is hugely impactful. Buying the right buildings, that early game draw over here, where I'm going to want to get that building. I mean, you don't necessarily need to get that building, but I kind of want to get that building because it's going to give me two symbols towards the specialist. Those specialists could be a nice extra boost, but then if I do that, I have to pay a premium because the land's in play. I'll have to pay tons of money. I don't even have that money. How can I get the money? I'll buy the land. There's all these things I'll slaughter. Like, everything kind of matters. And the order of the spots matters a lot, and trying to figure out what players are going to do matters. And as you start hitting these endpoints, you start adding those branch houses. Do you want to early commit to the branch houses and then make the connection points matter? Or do you want to wait till they're in play, but that might be too late. Other players might be there first. The worker placement spots in this game frequently make me feel like I kind of want to do a bit of everything, but I don't know which thing to do first because I don't know what you're going to take. The worker placement stuff matters. The buying land puzzle is fun, a lot of fun. I like buying land, sometimes just to get in your opponent's way if you don't even need the land right now for yourself, but you know they're going to want it. Getting the land to get in their way, force them to build in it can be impactful. But the flip side, the downside is sometimes they won't necessarily use the full amount over here as efficiently because they're not trying to. They're trying to avoid you. They'd rather pay the bank than you, so sometimes it's more beneficial to place that land in front of yourself and try to take advantage of it as efficiently as possible as you can. Going to that curing room over here, this will nicely take up a giant chunks of those spots, leaving only 2 spots I have to play to the bank. That could be very useful if I plan it right, and then I get cheaper land, and I get that curing house in play. That's going to bump my hog price up, which means I can be a specialist in hog pricing. Going around slaughtering those hogs, it's going to be 3 extra money every time I slaughter hogs. It's a huge, huge deal. Everything, the whole land engine here, the whole buying land and building puzzle of trying to figure out how and where to build, how to connect those points, when to take advantage of the efficiencies, having certain types of buildings next to each other to get those endgame extra points over there, the specialist you're trying to go for, all of that works very well. And then you combine that with the establishing of branch houses, which again, just extra little efficiencies. All the small things in this game give you a little extra thing. Okay, great, I'll go ahead to the branch house. I'll be able to both lock in potentially 2 or 4 endgame points. But not just that, I'm going to further increase my hog pricing, which means now I'm selling hogs for, let's go ahead and bump this up over here. Now I'm selling hogs for 11 when they still only cost 5. I'm getting a huge chunk of money that I'm going to go ahead and use to put right back into the game and get even more stuff. This is generally just a tight game. It's a well-executed tight game in which everything weaves together fairly nicely. Everything gives you a little bit of how this plays with that, how this affects that, and all the worker placement spots matter, making it so that you kind of want to do everything and you have to pick and choose the order to execute on it. As far as what I don't like, starting off very strongly with personal opinion here, I don't love the aesthetic of the game. I like the cover art, the art by Andrew Bosley, and again, prototype, I don't know what exactly is final over here. I believe the board and art and all that is final, I could be wrong though, but I don't love the aesthetic. It's very, very bland and dry. Thematically appropriate to the game, the era, all of that stuff, but doesn't, it doesn't compel me to want to dive into this, just visually speaking, so that's a first thing over there. Secondly, is the game semi-restricts specialization. The fact that you can only go to each space once per turn means I'm trying to build out my hog factory. I'm trying to become the best hog slaughterer you've ever seen, but I can only slaughter hogs once a turn, which feels thematically incorrect, and I don't like that restriction. For balance issues, it might make sense. I'm not going to comment on that, but for the simple fact that I want to sit there and I want to slaughter hogs as much as I possibly can because I've built up that best hog slaughtering thing, the game kind of restricts you from doing things like that, which makes it feel a little less rewarding to build out those specializations, which is, again, balance might be fine, just feels less fun to me. Additionally, and this kind of ties together with what I just said, there's not a lot of wow moments in the game. The game works well together. Everything works with each other. Everything streamlines. You move up reputation, you bump up your price. You go ahead and put down a branch house, you bump up your price. You buy a building gather specialist, you bump up your price. You're constantly bumping up your price while being mindful of the price point of the actual supply as well, and trying to make everything work in your favor. It all works well. But there's very few wow moments in the game. There's very few, oh my gosh, look at this thing that I just did. It's small incremental gains across the whole game, across all 6 rounds. It's maybe just specifically even just the fact that you can't specialize and go ahead and take that turn where you get 18 money because you place 3 hog slaughtering. The game doesn't have a lot of wow moments. It works well, but it never goes crazy, if that makes sense. As far as I can see others not liking, the strikes and low morale might be a factor. For me, losing workers and things like that is never a fun moment in games, but it's not so penalizing in this game that even when strikes do happen, you lose a worker for a round, everyone's losing a worker, it's not the end of the world, and sometimes you work together to try to get rid of a few tokens and keep that union spirit in check and all of those things. So it might bother you, it happened to not bother me, even though that is the kind of thing it usually does. And then the land game as well. That land game, which I appreciate the aspect of trying to lock in and save land that's useful for yourself, or at least forcing your opponents to pay, or sometimes intentionally placing your land so that opponents can pay. You may find that frustrating. I find it to be part of the fun tension, similar to the worker placement to a degree, but with an extra layer of, I'm not just going for a spot you want, I'm also going to take that spot you want and use it to buy the land that you want. It kind of ties nicely together with the fact that the worker placement matters. As far as final thoughts on Union Stockyards, Union Stockyards is a tight, well-executed game. Every single thing works well together. The efficiencies you get from all this stuff, it just works well. This is a very, very solid game that also doesn't strongly compel me. It works. It does a good job. It's an enjoyable engine. I like what it's doing, but it also just doesn't give me those wow moments that I crave. Combined with the aesthetic of the game, it feels like a very solid dry Euro. A dry Euro, just both visually and mechanically. It is good, it is solid. If you like that kind of thing, I think this is a very well executed version of it. For me, I like those wow moments. I like doing cool things. I like having incredible moments, and Union Stockyards is a fun game. The events are going to keep it, mixed up and all that. It just doesn't make it enough for me that I'm overly compelled. I like it, I enjoy it, I can recommend it, but also I like that little extra flair in my games. For me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. Solid game, but with that aspect to it. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, this game somewhat similarly reminds me of Viticulture. It has a little bit of similarity in terms of the general, first of all, the dryness, the visual aspect. I hate the way Viticulture looks as much as I love that game, but also just, I think the general turn sequencing, the worker placement, the efficiencies you have, very different engines, but they do feel similar. And then if you want a worker placement game with livestock and cattle and buildings and all those things that gives you some incredibly crazy moments, then Le Havre from Uwe Rosenberg is going to be my go-to there. A lot of crazy efficiencies you can have, a lot more just bizarre, over-the-top, incredible, potentially unbalanced aspects to it, but that's Le Havre. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I'll have a link to the campaign down below, and as always, have a good one.